We're so excited to welcome Alan Edwards and Ryan McAlpine with us today. We're going to talk about some technical theater, specifically. I think our expertise here is definitely lighting, and Ryan's working in fly rigging, I think exclusively, right, Ryan?
I can jump around as a theater technician, but primarily in theater rigging, yes.
Okay, so I guess if we could just start off, if you could give us a little background on your education, what you've been doing, and what got you to the place you are now. Go ahead, Alan. We'll go. Oh, okay, there. Never mind.
Ryan, go ahead.
Well, we'll just go right into it. Alan and I actually we both went to Ithaca College after high school. He informed me that I was going to be going to Ithaca, and so I had to make the accommodations necessary. But we spent our 4 years at Ithaca College, and then I came out of that college experience I did some summer stocks. I did some Utah shakes. I did some Pennsylvania shakes. And then I immediately kind of went on the road. So I toured as a theater technician for 5 to 6 years, toured through the States and into Canada up until about 2012, when I was on a tour of Billy Elliot and had an opportunity to get off of the road and take a break from that. And at that point, I started working for a company called Flying by Foy, which primarily does performer flying effects. And I've been doing that ever since. So I got off of the road where I didn't live anywhere, and now I just travel most of the time.
And I tell everybody where you are now and the time.
And it's currently 7 a.m. here in Melbourne, Australia, where I am today.
And we're so grateful for you joining us because we've all been up. It's 5 here, so we've been up for a while. Thank you. Alan, fill us in. What you been doing?
After graduation from high school, I did go to Ithaca College for undergrad, studied lighting and scenery, and I graduated in 2007. And 2 weeks after college graduation, I went to work in a set designer studio here in New York. And I ended up 3 weeks after starting with him working on Elmo's Christmas Countdown, which is a show that still airs on ABC at Christmas. And then I worked in props on a handful of Broadway shows. And then in like January of 2008, I decided, that was December of 2007, I decided I was not going to continue that route and that I was going to go back to grad school. And so I ended up at grad school in the fall of 2008 through 2011, and then graduated in 2011 and moved to New York, and I have been here ever since. Trying to make it.
Now, Alan, you're sounding really, really muffled. Ryan, is it muffled for you?
Yeah.
Oh, am I?
Oh, there we go.
Is it?
No, that's yeah. In a tunnel or something.
Okay. Well, is it good?
Yeah, that's good now. Yeah. Sounded like it was through a tunnel. Awesome. So, Alan, what made you kind of change your mind and change direction?
Well, I specifically, I was in a casket stapling some lining in December of 2008, and I think it had been like 10 or 12 weeks of just really long. It was my second Broadway show in props, and it was just like, it was a lot, and I was just like, this just can't be. And I do remember that was like all-nighter number 2 or 3 in a row after just a long stint, and it was just me, and I was just like, how did I end up here? We just got to get out of it.
Yeah, talk about a metaphorical
I mean, it's the
I'm gonna
irony that that play is He Dead? And yes, I was in a casket on that production. Yes.
like this is not it. This is not it for me. So what made you decide to go the lighting route?
I studied design in undergrad, and
Hmm.
I did lighting at RH. That's where it all started.
Hmm.
Um, and like working on, I don't even just want to classify it as Broadway, but like you get in the room, and then like I felt like I was in the room and I was trying to figure out what everyone else knew that I didn't. And uh, at that point, I was like, I'm not going to figure it out here. I don't know what it is. And so when I was applying to school, I said, I guess I'll apply for the thing that I used to do that I really like doing. And so you have to pick one at the school I was applying to. And so I picked lighting. And what's funny is that after graduation from RH, I was in scenery for those, for that year. I was working in scenery. So that's how I decided.
Nice. So Ryan, because I don't know, and I will fully admit my technical expertise is pretty limited. Um,
Sure.
I know all the magic happens with you guys. So what can you tell us a little bit about what being a technical, like in technical theater on the road or in a Broadway theater looks like?
Yeah, I mean, those are slightly different worlds. I can touch on. We'll start with the road a little bit. I had primarily just been I was in the construction type field of theater. So I was before I got on the road, I was just building. I kind of landed in the props world. You were talking about like stapling in a casket, Alan. I was like, that sounds great. I mean, it sounds like good solid work. um, so I was working in Utah, and I was just building the furniture and other small pieces of scenery. There was a lot of like creative solutions that was interesting about that job. But I just kind of had this itch to be on the road, and I didn't really know what it was until I got there. But that made it interesting. I was very confident that that's what I wanted to do for some reason. And it's depending on the scale of show that you're on. I started on a one-nighter tour, which meant that something like 70% of the venues we were in, we were only in for a day. So we would start at, between 6 and 8 in the morning. We would load the show in with the local crew. We would then have the show would already, exist. So we would perform the show as per everyone, and we would be teaching the local staff how to do the things with us. And then as soon as that show was over, we would be starting to take stuff apart and getting it back onto trucks so that we could ship it to the next place. And as the sits get longer, you can be a little bit more established. The load-ins become longer, the load-outs become longer as you have more equipment, more technology, and more things to do to make a really, large-scale show happen. And it becomes a little bit more in that world about supervising and having the knowledge of like what a show is, how it runs, what the creative staff and the technical staff that put it together are trying to accomplish. And so you're just trying to like put this product up every day and make it to the vision of everyone that came before you. Which sometimes means that like something breaks and you have to fix it, and it means that you have to find the right cues and hit them. And there was a couple tours I did that had flying in it before I worked exclusively kind of in this realm, and you had to teach a couple people how to make someone fly in, and when they had only done it like once before the opening night. So there's a large scope, and so now I've just taken like the tours, like what I was doing there, and I just jumped to the other side of it. So now I'm on the creation side, the production side, everything that happens before the show opens, and then helping to maintain those projects as they are long running.
That's awesome. Yeah, I always am in awe of the technical aspect of tours, because you see this product on stage and I'm like, how? How did that come out of a tractor trailer and then it's stable and people are jumping around and moving? It's brilliant to me.
Well, I think the interesting thing about a tour is that there's just so much you don't know. Even you go in, you're like, well, look at all this stuff. This is great that they put it in, they took it out, but there was, months and months and months of pre-production work and engineering and reconfiguration. Even if you see a show on Broadway and then you see it on tour, it's gone through the creative process again in many cases to be reconfigured and rethought. You don't have the ability to take the same materials. You can't, there's not traps in roadhouses. You can't bring things up through the floor. You can't have things that are as big, and they have to come apart and go back together again. So there's a lot more. What's interesting about the touring world from the pre-production side is there's a lot of creative solutions that have to happen, which make it kind of a fun world to be in.
Yeah, and I see we've got a question for you. I'm asking if you miss working on those tours.
I do still end up on tours. I still go as an employee of Foy. We have flying equipment that is on tours. So there's like Lion Kings. I'll go out to a Lion King and I'll inspect the equipment, and I'll be out there and I might watch the show and see how things are going. So I still am connected to it, so I don't miss it as much. There's a lot of, it's a very difficult thing to do for the performers and the technicians on those projects. You're not living anywhere necessarily. You may have a family that you're not seeing. You miss holidays, and sometimes you're working all of the time. So there's a lot of really interesting things about it, but there's a lot of mental strife, and you have to. What I didn't know at the time was you have to take a lot of self-care in order to have a life. So it's not just like I'm working and I'm doing the show all of the time. So those are like bubbles. Now we've all experienced bubbles in our time now, but these are like little bubbles that you don't get out of until those shows are kind of over.
Thank you. So Alan, you were, before we went live, you were talking about a project that just came your way, and you were talking about lighting plots. I know we're kind of jumping off a little bit with what Ryan's saying about all the pre-production and planning that goes into that. I'm assuming that, again, admitting that I don't know as much about this, how this all works together, how closely do you need to work with the set director and the set designer when you think about lighting a show?
I mean, in the ideal scenario, we were all working cohesively together. I was actually just speaking with a student earlier, and he's a set design student. And some of my mentors, they say that the set designer really is the lighting designer, because they decide to some degree how light will enter or can enter space. And so there's a weird thing that happens from like real life as we experience it, all of us, to trying to put something like real life or a entirely falsified environment on stage. That lighting still has to deal so closely with the physics. Like, light functions the exact same way in real life as it does on stage. There's no bending that. And so everything we do on stage is fake. It's entirely fake. So how are we going to make it seem like something that happens in reality? And I think that right there is why we really do need to work so closely together. It's like, there's moments where you want some scenery, wants something symmetrical, but lighting would like to light something symmetrically, and there's also this other thing that's in the air that's an obstruction for all of it. How do we make that happen? In real life, these three things may not happen together. but on stage, we want to see them as though they happen together and symmetrical. So somehow we have to figure out how we're all going to look like we're occupying the same space when we're not, because we can't. It's a weird, it's a not weird. It's a symbiotic relationship.
And then just to add on to that, once you're in your project, that part in the process, and even after the design has happened, we could have vendors, construction vendors, vendors like I work for, that come in and say, well, you envision this thing and it doesn't work like that. It needs to be a foot deeper. And so you had this perfect lighting plot that you came up with, and we're asking you to change it now. And so there's, even after that design process, there's still things that change. And then you get into the venue and you see the reality of where things are and how things sit there. And there's constant changing workflow there. I mean, I can't tell you the number of times I've shut up in a venue and then just said, like, well, we can't physically make this effect work unless you move your electric downstage a foot. And that's a big deal. So there's a lot of flexibility that comes from that design team that Alan constantly has to work with, even after he comes up with what is a perfect ideal situation.
And it's interesting because then it's like a conversation of priorities where we have to decide, I guess I'm at the point in a career where I've kind of gotten all like crazy ideas out. We've done this, we've done that. And now I'm at the point of, so what do we actually need to do? And what do we need to do better? And what can we not do so well over here so we can do great somewhere else? And so, like, that's a real, maybe the backlight doesn't need to be perfect. I mean, it can be, or it can be a different. I don't have particularly a driving need to put it any particular place. We should come up with what we want this thing to look and feel like. The audience is going to experience it over time. So they won't know what we didn't choose. So how do we make that decision? Not how. We should.
And those are the best relationships to be in, because we all run into a decent amount of places where there's 4 or 5 people and they're just like, well, I want what I want, and I'm so sorry, but we're just doing it my way. And you're like, all right, well, this is not a collaborative effort now, and this isn't a pleasant experience for me. And plus, you're telling me you really have to put that light in a place where I thought we wanted to fly this performer through here, and so then there's a whole world of above kind of both of us, of production managers that basically are just personality dealers that have to just basically make rulings all the time. I mean, it's a much bigger job than that, but a lot of this job is about how you just go about it with your personality, how you which battles you choose, and then being flexible and having a jovial, kind of loose mentality, saying, what is the big picture here? Like, if we are all individually looking at what the big picture is, then we can, put an ego aside and say, well, let's make this work.
Yeah, this is not the first time I've heard this sentiment in these talkbacks about collaboration and reputation, and really being thoughtful about how you approach people and work together in that symbiotic relationship that, Alan mentioned. So what, I know the kids have always wanted to hear about, like, your favorite moments working. What are some of those moments that stand out as where you felt accomplished or just really enjoyed what you were doing? So I know that's always a comment and question we hear from the kids. They love to hear the happy, pretty side.
I can think of 2 recent ones. I was doing a production of Sweeney Todd a couple years ago, And I'm going to say that the production was simplified. We know that there's a lot of special effects and it's usually all that. And that was not where this production went. It was more like ghosts floating around. And even to say the word anyway, a series of unfortunate people and events. And in the opening number, it's just like so simple, but it did feel ghostly, and wasn't big and bold. And then the appearance of Sweeney, I guess I can call him that, aligning with a large orchestra, a 30-piece orchestra. That was the point of the music. The point of the performance was to hear the full orchestration, but with in-depth staging. And I mean, just in the creation of all of these other worlds that did rely a lot more so on a sketch quality between a scenic piece and lighting, and then good staging. It was just it wasn't that the world was so heavily fleshed out, but if you just were following along and were lost in the story, the whole thing was there right in front of you. That was a fantastic moment. Yeah. And then there's a new musical that I worked on a couple years ago, and there's just this one transition from backstage to onstage, and it only takes about 12 seconds. But the way that the sound cue lined up, that lined up with lighting, that lined up with an on-air sign, that lined up with a curtain closing on what is backstage and opening just as soon as it closed, and that backstage role is entirely different, and that's lighting and scenery together. I mean, it's pure magic. I have watched it over and over and over again, like people flying around backstage to make that real simple thing happen like that. And it's like, I don't know the audience applauded. I don't know if they understood exactly what just happened back there.
But that's the magic of theater, right? That most people know the curtain closes and there's usually a little delay, but to have it be so fluid, I'd applaud too. I mean, to understand, and again, I don't understand it, but to see what crews behind the scenes can do, it's magical to me. And you're right. It's one of the most thrilling things to be a witness to as well, but to then design it and be a part of making it happen, that's incredible too.
There's something about a transition, like as a designer or a technician that's like trying to like put a show together, like to make a perfect set of transitions happen, like that's all the problem areas. Like, how do we get from this one thing to the next thing and make it look seamless and not, belabored? Like, how do we take all of the air out of that? Like, I've done a million Peter Pans where like the decision is just like, well, we're going to close the front curtain and we're going to sit here for 3 minutes. Then we're going to open the curtain again. Like, how can we make that, nothing and look like there was no effort in it? And it's that thing that kind of ends up having almost no appreciation. That's a perfect, victory. But I also, I've worked on many different, versions of Billy Elliot before, and there's a dream ballet in it that has a flying sequence where there's the Billy is flying with an older version of himself through the air, and they're kind of like in that Superman kind of forward pose where they're being lifted from the small of their back. And it was always one of my favorite moments because the first time I saw it, I was in awe of it because it's just like this beautiful, serene, kind of weightless effect. And but there's so much work in it. There's the boy is being manipulated by the older dancer on stage, so it's just kind of on a pendulum, and they're kind of just going back and forth. But there's so much that's done in that cone of flight. And when I started working on the tour and I started being the operator as part of that, that's when I really felt that you could be a part of a creative, dialogue as a technician, because it was from my manipulation that this could seem such an easy effect to watch on stage. So every time that I was able to make that happen, and we all, like the three of us were like, oh yeah, that was great. Like this felt so good. I always felt really good about that. And then a little bit less on the like fun, more on the ego side maybe. We also do a bunch of effects for like Saturday Night Live and stuff like that. And there was, they were doing a bunch of, vignette musical kind of bits with John Mulaney was kind of part of all of those.
The lobster in the airport.
The lobster in the airport type things. And I ended up being part of one where we flew Jake Gyllenhaal in it. And like, so I was there and it went great. And the show went as good as it could have. And then the next day, Saturday Night Live like published a whole like a poster that had like all of the characters and had Jake Gyllenhaal like flying, like he was up in the air behind everyone. And I was like, all right, I was part of that. That's kind of cool. So I like to have those little moments.
Yeah, that was a heck of a skit. I remember that was a good one. So can you tell us a little bit about what, like physically, what it means to rig and fly someone? Because I think our students, in their limited experience with the work we've done, I don't think we've flown anybody. Our structure doesn't really help it, but it's been just one person yanking somebody up. It's not that ballet you just talked about in Billy Elliot. So what physicality and how does it all work?
Yeah, so we have a series of different equipment solutions, and there's a lot of different ways to do performer flying, both manual and automated, that you see. So like when you watch someone like on a rock concert and they're like flying through the air, like Pink does a lot of that type of flying. Like there's a lot of like engineering that goes into that, but it can be as simple as just a track, a specially made track with special equipment that rolls along that track, kind of like a curtain track. Like, how the curtain can roll across because you pull that line, and the travel, the left and right movement that we do is very similar in concept, obviously amped up to take on the correct forces. But you can also, it can be as simple even as just a pulley goes to another pulley with a wire rope, or you could have an actual properly rated rope that goes to a person and is connected to them per some type of harness. And then someone on the other end that has another rope that they are pulling down on. So it's a, up and down movement. And all of that stuff needs to be rated and put structurally in place. But it can be that easy. And then everything else is, that's, you're lifting the amount of weight in that scenario I'm talking about. So then we have many different solutions so that you lift less weight, or you can make that go to a winch, or you can have a lot longer breadth of flight. Like if you have a short house, like a fly house, but you want to fly someone very high, you have to have a very creative solution to make cables go through a bunch of different pulleys in order to make them go high enough. So there's it's a lot of cable theory and a lot of engineering that's involved. But we go into schools a lot, and we have our equipment, and it's a track, and we put it up, and we have a lift rope, and we have a travel rope that goes through and connects basically to a carrier or a piece of track that just slides all along, and you can you fly a person on that. And so that's kind of how we get to that world. We implement our equipment onto pre-existing structure in order to make that happen. I mean, that's kind of a vague.
No, that's all right. So so just to would you, if on a tour, would you potentially rig the same flight differently in different houses?
No, but I would be able to have. I would have a flexible set of equipment. So like if we're looking at a tour, we're looking at like these are all of the types of houses we're going into, and we'll be able to hopefully know if there's one venue or another that's going to be problematic that we'll have to make a different plan for. But most of the time, it's this amount of equipment, and it's on chain hoists and truss, or it's we're putting it onto a batten and then we're flying it up and then we're reinforcing it and tying down arbors. And then it's just the same equipment maybe, and it can get longer or shorter. And so you may have to adjust the flight, but it's still hypothetically on stage, like in between the proscenium, it should look the same. And it's just how we're accomplishing it backstage that may be a little bit different. Especially on a tour, we would try to put everything at the same place. So if you have 15 venues and, we're going to base everything on the smallest venue, which is sometimes when you go see a touring show, you may look at it and be like, well, this feels, it feels really small in this place. I wonder why it looks so small. And it's probably because they're not planning for always the biggest venue. They're looking for what's the worst case and then just kind of rolling with that.
So what you're telling me, I'm hearing, is that if we ever wanted to fly someone in our auditorium, you could make it happen?
It would, well, I mean, it's either, time and effort and money. You can make anything happen.
The last component, of course, being the key one. But someday, before I'm done, I would love to really legitimately fly someone on our stage. But that's a conversation.
I certainly made it happen in a lot worse venues, so there it is.
Yeah. And not to insinuate it's a worse venue, but did you do a show in Honeoye Falls in the school?
Yeah.
Okay, that's what you did, Mary Poppins there? I can't remember who told me that.
Poppins, yeah.
Okay. Not to say that they have a different, but that just jogged my memory that somebody had told me you did that work locally.
Yeah, I've done a whole bunch of different schools in the Rochester area, and there's just different challenges each venue has because they don't plan to bring in a lot of equipment. You're planning, when those schools are engineered, they're, we're going to put some lights up, we're going to put some lights up. Even like most of these venues aren't planning to put up, 3 or 4 or 5 moving lights on each of these battens. That was never planned for. They want to light a concert, a orchestra concert. So, and then it's all of us that come in and say, how can we be more ambitious how can we make things more spectacular for, these students? And then we try to engineer it differently.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Just like a good tangible example of that is like, for instance, the pipes that go up and down on stage. In some houses, there are enough of them to be one every 6 inches, one every 8 inches, and like that. All that is the flexibility as to where you could possibly put something without having to move one of those. Whereas, in educational theaters, there's a lot less, and they're further apart. Like that's just the idea of what maybe something may be used for. Just different thoughts about that.
Yeah, it's always a game of getting creative as possible to make it work and trying to figure out where those dead spots are. So, Alan, when you go in looking at planning a show, what's kind of the process you go through to plot a show and make the effects that the director or creative team want to happen? And I know that's a very complex question, probably, but
the process. Process. Everyone has their own way of going about this. To read the thing or take it in, read the script or whatever first, I guess, obviously. and then to discuss with the director what they're thinking. I mean, I like to do it like that because maybe this is a traditional, a classic script or whatever. But they don't have that idea about it. That's not so. That's before I get going anywhere. I need to know what the intent of what we're about to do here. And then I hate to say, I mean, there's the collaborative period. With this scenery and costumes usually go first. The people who are making the tangible world, and I actually learn a lot. Not that they have to, but I learn a lot about what the director is, what vision they have by what they direct these people to do. And there, I mean, there's an interesting, triangle there that the best relationship that normal people have is to their physical world, and that, I mean, people interact with stuff every day and they interact with clothes every day. So they have a better chance of getting what they assume or think out through the physical. Whereas lighting is a little bit complicated, or it's neither here nor there to talk about. I have this book here called The Interaction of Color by Joseph Albers. Funny, I didn't plan this. I'm using it in class. But it's so hard to talk about color because, we don't even know if everyone sees the same color. So where the director and the set and costume are able to get to somehow makes it a little bit more fluid for myself and the director to have conversations. And if that is not an area they, can comfortably speak in, hopefully I can learn enough by asking. I have a tendency to ask a lot of questions by what they say and what they don't say. That allows me to come up with where we're going to go. And I mean, there's a lot of options that I have to build in also, because maybe a word that they use to describe something does not equal what I think that is when I put that on stage. And so once they see it and respond, now we have a thing we can talk about. And now what do we do? So there's I build some things. I'm like, this is where we're going. But also, if we don't go here, how do we have the flexibility to go somewhere else?
And what's kind of the information you need about a space that a production is going to take place in before you can really make a plan?
Accurate drawings. I need to know. I mean, it's like I guess the basic. What is the physical structure? Whether it's a theater, an outdoor amphitheater, a park. What are we starting with? And then what is the equipment that we have that we're working with, and what is the budget? What are we just? That's really tangible information. Just baseline. Where are we? And then we can talk about whatever. So you mix that with all of the idea and intention, and then you can, make decisions. Either we have money and we really want to do this, so we're going to spend the money to make this place that was not designed for us. We'll make it do it. Or we don't have the money, and we're still going to come up with a creative way to tell this story in this place, and this is what our priorities are. So there's a large, you can do anything anywhere. It's just a matter of what exactly you're trying to do. And that's a super vague answer, but.
Well, I mean, that's how it works with us too. All of those same exact elements. What is the intention? What is the space? What are we trying to accomplish? I mean, it really just rhymes down to that. What are the resources that we have at our hands? So you were saying that, and I was like, yep, those are all the same conversations.
It's like I've done a bunch of shows outdoors at this venue here in New York City, and we're doing another one this year. And every once in a while, I think 2 out of the last 5 I've done have transferred somewhere else. This venue has particular requirements. It's outdoors in the summer, but we're gonna put this show on. I design it there's a reason that it's done that the lighting particularly is done a certain way in this venue, that when it transfers to an indoor space that is a typical theater, you know, things are done differently. Some of them are done better because we can. It's just, but the intention of what we're trying to do, often the set doesn't change, but the lighting changes. The idea is still the same, but it's done differently. And I mean, that's typical of, like Ryan was talking about, national tours. When I have shows that it's not a tour, but it'll start at one theater and then also play 2 or 3 others. That's a weird spot between national tour and one-time production, where the set is designed to fit, but the lighting is not designed in its smallest. It's custom per venue.
So how does that work? So if you were doing something that was like that, would you have to come back in multiple times? And is that up to you as a designer to fix that, as it were?
I mean, yeah, you keep the idea the same. Ideally, what the 3 venues are, so you can kind of, where the lowest common denominator is. But like, if something is going to sit somewhere and play, I had a show sit somewhere for 6 weeks 2 years ago, and then go on and play somewhere else for 3 weeks. I'm gonna work hard to make it look really great at the 6-week place, but it's also still got to look good at the place where it's playing 3 weeks. And it's a redesign. I mean, it's essentially a redesign to figure out how you're going to do the producer or the artistic director they want the show they saw.
and it's all that nuance that it's up to you to make happen. And that's what I think is underrated and people don't understand all the time about the technical side of theater, that the show I see at the auditorium theater is different if I saw that same show in, Saratoga. It's just, it's altered. I think that's one of the most admirable parts of how do you make that all happen before, and how do you transfer? So for a tour like that, is it all down to, because this is me trying to wrap my brain around it. So I know, like, Ryan, you go to the different venues. If you're doing that tour, the one who's running it, who's setting it up. Does the lighting designer isn't running the shows generally. So how does that happen? Is it up to technicians to figure out how to bring the image and the spirit and intention to life?
I mean, yeah. So there's a line between national tour and like regional multi-produced production. For the regional multi-produced production, me and my assistants or whatever, we are very hands-on with that production. It's only going to play 3 or 4 venues, so we will like descend on it and take care of it. And then I'll go out to the theater once so and so has already got the lights up in the air. The technicians have hung the show as they've gotten new drawings for this venue. They put it up. The assistant knows the focus from the previous place. They'll go in and focus it, and then I will come in and just fix it. For a national tour, I mean, Ryan can speak probably more at having seen the actual 50 city situation, but it's even designed differently from the beginning. If you know that you're in lighting land, if you know that half the theaters that you're in do not have front of house lighting positions, then the show is designed without them. You can't.
Or they send in truss and they create their own.
If they can, yes.
If they can, yeah.
So the technicians, and then the technicians who stay with the show on the tour are able to make a lot of, like, they know what the intent is. And so, do I go out to every city? No. Do the assistants go out to every city? No. The head electrician and the techs, and they are clear of what the intention is. Back here in the studio, there is an advanced process that goes out, to manage the major situation. But Ryan, am I wrong?
No. I think that that all makes sense. And most of the time, like on long running projects, so like long running tours and like your Broadway style stuff, like there's in the beginning process, the design is set and it's made, and then there's a group of people, like the technicians and the people under the designer, the associates that are maybe empowered with the design also, and like stage management are all people that understand what the design is supposed to be, and they're all trying to accomplish it in every scenario. So especially with like a Broadway or a tour, one of the first things that happens after they open and everyone's like happy is they'll start taking pictures of every look that happens on stage. So there is a master book so that it can be reproduced. The reality is, with almost every larger project, you don't always know what the next life is. And so you want to document all this stuff as best you can so that anyone can come in. And then it really is a collaboration on a tour. Whereas if you're going to a weird venue where there has to be a lot of major changes, and it's necessary for the integrity of the design to send in an associate, they'll meet and they'll help to troubleshoot or to adjust the design in order to accomplish this show. But on a normal day, it'll be as soon as everything's hung and circuited and everything's working, it's the technicians on stage, a moving light programmer, that's usually the head electrician that has the board there. And there's kind of a cheat sheet that stage management has, and they walk around and they focus on the people, and they have a list and they know exactly what every look is supposed to be, and they go through the light positions they need to hit on stage. So it's a stage manager a lot of the times that's kind of auto correcting this with the head electrician. But because you have to remember, like, all of these people can quit at some point in time. Like, everybody can leave this show and then new people have to come in. So you have to be able to transfer information to a different set of heads in a smart way.
And it's interesting that, like, I have stage managers in class at school, and that's exactly, they're legitimately the only people watching the show straight through every night.
Yeah.
So if you need to know what something is supposed to be, especially after they've seen it 30, 40, 50, 100 times.
Right.
Yeah, the stage managers, when we had a student who came back and then he was on the Once on This Island tour, when I went to see the show, he let us, come up on stage, and just, that alone, like the sand, that's part of, they don't travel with the sand comes from the venue, and it's just, and watching them, and the stage manager, she was like, all right, guys, time's up, get out. I got to reset everything. It's just, and even in between the matinee and the evening performance, I don't know how stage managers do it. I can only imagine they have stock in Tums and other antacids to get through. So those sound like a lot of really technical kind of problems, not problems, but challenges, right, that you're going through. What, oh gosh, I had it when you were talking, Alan, the idea of how do you approach when you have, are there different ways you approach based on the performer, like makeup, skin color, things that really affect, like, is there something that's different with lighting? Obviously costumes constantly change color, but is there a technique or a difference between how you would create your plans based on casting and that?
I mean, the actual answer is, I mean, the broad answer is there a specific way? No. But it comes down to, I mean, like specifically skin tone is just like everything else in the world is varied. And color and intensity affect everything differently. And so, the shades of the shades and hues, or hues, shades, and tints that are and undertones that are in skin tone. In color world, they need different things to help them do what they do best. In color theory, you have to send some of a specific color out there or a range in order to get any of it back. So, like if you put orange light on a blue turd, you will not see the blue. You simply will not see it. So, you have to think that way, and it doesn't take much to solve. It's not even. I mean, to make something look right. Um, I mean that's the answer. Is there a specific technique? Hang these lights with these colors, and no, there is no. Um, in fact, someone we were talking about the musical 42nd Street. I had my class watch 2017 production, and someone did ask the question about when Peggy is in the blue sequin dress, the color of her flower pot. It seemed like it was a lot of blue light, and I said, well, it's interesting because it must have been that her skin color could take all that heat. Because if she didn't have a lot of warmth in her skin, then the blue would have just made her look ice cold. That's just it was just that I had never thought about it or looked at it that hard, but in the wide shot you can see that light is pretty doggone blue, or at least in comparison to, and maybe the rest of the light on stage was very yellow. I don't know, but that's the kind of thing that, what does it look like under the condition, and how do we make her look great? That's it. I
Yeah.
mean, I did a production of The Piano Lesson, and there's a character in it. His name is Lyman, and in a scene that is lights off, so the whole scene takes place in the dark. He's got on a peach suit. It's written into the script. So if the guy who's playing Lyman is a darker skin tone, you've got two challenges. One, it's a technical craft thing of being, how do you light a scene that is supposed to be in the dark and not give away that there is light on? And two, how do you make this skin tone, just by the mere fact that it's darker, it needs more, uh, say, lumen, just to allow us to see. What are you putting out there? If you're putting out there the right thing, you need a lot less of it to help his skin come out so we can see him. That's it. But then you also have the added challenge of, he's got on a peach suit.
Right.
So,
The face.
it's just like that kind of thinking of how are you going to do that?
Yeah, that's fascinating. And I think those are things. And so you mentioned you have students. I can't remember if we talked about where are you teaching and what are you teaching?
Lighting design at the Yale School of Drama.
Oh, beautiful. And is that something that you were doing? Like, how did you get into education and teaching? I know that seems like a drastic shift, but the time is dwindling, and I just want to know more.
I mean, I didn't. Getting an MFA is almost a certification to teach. I will not. I will say I hadn't. Graduating from. I also went to Yale. Graduating from there, I did not immediately plan to return teaching. Like after 21 years in school, that was not my intention. Um, and a year out, it takes a lot to get a career going, and someone offered me a job teaching one class, not at Yale, at a different school. And I said, great, I can do that. It's, 2 hours once a week. And there's, some money I can count on. And so, like, I've just kind of kept a teaching job. I've gone all over the place at different colleges and universities. And then in 2016, the School of Drama asked me, could I do essentially that same thing, but there. And so I taught the stage managers for 3 years. And then that turned into, can you teach the intro class and just bring the stage managers into that class? And that's where I have been. This is the end of my 3rd or 4th year doing that cycle. So
Awesome.
I have all of the first year non-lighting designers. So it's set, costume, projection, sound, and stage management.
Wow. That's a lot. And that's such varied perspectives to bring in and educate. That's so, and I think too, at the heart of it all, I think especially in technical theater, and this is what I keep hearing, that I think you guys probably are both, whether formal or not, are teachers, right? You're constantly teaching who comes in, helping them, because experience seems to be the way to really learn. In a classroom is where the foundation might start, but being out there. So, what advice might you have for somebody to start maybe getting that education in person, hands-on stuff? What might a student who's looking at doing this, what might they want to do?
Well, so there's many different routes depending on what you do. If you just want to, I mean, either way, if you just want to be in theater, then go find theater and ask someone a question about how to get involved with it. Because there's community theater, there's regional theater in Rochester, there's a whole bunch of options. I know that I somehow just got connected with someone at Jiva, and I just went and watched a show with the stage manager one day, and it was a great experience. I remember it to this day. So just starting to get involved and ask questions like that. There's a ton of different education out there in the world for theater, and with a lot of different ranges. It does. There is something to be sensitive about, especially depending on the type of technician or type of world you're going into, that there is a price to pay for that. And I know a lot of theater professionals that spend decades paying off student debt from that education. So you have to know it's better to know about that, because it's being talked about more now than it was when we got out of school. But there's also, like, if you want to be a technician, if you want to work backstage, there's opportunities, in Rochester, and there's summer stock theaters in that area. There is, associated with a technician union, a stagehand union that exists in Rochester, and there's a hall you can go down to and get connected there. So you can go find out about what work they're doing and try to get on a overhire list and try to get down and just go work on stuff that goes through. You can work on, rock shows. You can work on conventions. Like, there's a wide range to be hands-on. That kind of isn't, I don't think, talked about enough. But I appreciate my education always. I know that I wouldn't be where I am today based on what I knew at the time if I hadn't gone through Ithaca College and then gotten those connections, because a lot of my experience is based on the networking and connections I made.
I mean, so while at RA, actually, I can't remember how we ended up there, but a bunch of us were part of the program at the Rochester Broadway Theater Room. And I just don't know how it started, how we ended up going to see shows. I remember we'd sign up and they would give us tickets and we'd see them. And we'd have these talkbacks. And I somehow ended up kind of friends with the head electrician. He's since passed away, but Bob Katari at the Auditorium Theater. And I remember I would just stay after the audience had left and walk down to the front, and he would come out, and then he started inviting me up on stage. And so I got to see the backstage of, I don't know however many Broadway shows came through Rochester between 2000 and 2003. And actually, I did the coat check there for that long. And so that was an interesting place to start, just to get to see all of these things. And then while I was in college, we barely had email in 2003. I used to send what was it, Juno, email to stage managers. And when we came to New York for the first time in 2000, and I came back a couple times between 2000 and 2007, probably like 3 or 4 times. And I would leave letters at the stage door, and sometimes the stage manager would either call or they would email back or they would send a note back. And so I formed a little relationship to be able to say, hey, I'm coming to New York. I just want to talk. Can I just see backstage? And most of them were receptive. I have 42nd Street on the wall right there, because particularly a stage manager took me up on that and then actually said, if you come back to New York during this time, you can be backstage during a performance and we can talk and we can do this. And so my dad brought me back to New York in 2004 for that experience. And so, I mean, that's not work, but like there's something at the at the level that a student is at in high school now, as much saturation as you can get to even start to figure out what you're trying to do or what is interesting. I mean, RH was great for me. I figured it out, and that's still what I do today. But there's so much out there that a student can say, hi, I'm new, I'm interested, can I know more? Jiva is a great place. There are a lot of other regional theaters. I just want to see what you're doing and how it's done.
I think it's as simple as just be curious and ask questions. Like, just be unafraid to start a conversation, because most of the time if someone came up to me and started, prying around about certain things, I'd probably be interested to talk to them about it, because why not? We're here not to, lock up all this information. We're here to share it with the next group of people so we can continue to push the boundaries and, make more interesting things happen. I mean, the reality is that we're only, pushing farther in our society now because people keep coming up from below and they have good ideas and there's interesting things and people are ready for, change, and, we just keep pushing. So, it's good to bring on more of those flexible, influencing minds.
Yeah, I love that. And I think that's such a good idea. And I think our actors sometimes are really good at auditioning for things, but our students who are really interested in tech don't necessarily think about, hey, you can go watch, you can go figure some things out. So it's good to hear that don't be afraid to hang out and see if you can catch somebody out back of RBTL, when you're there a lot of times hanging out after the show or before it starts, when you're going in, have a conversation. No one's going to be nasty, I don't think.
And
right?
Once you start getting into the job field, sometimes it's easy as just, I showed up on time. I showed up early. I'm interested. I came prepared, and I'm listening, and I'm going to do what you ask of me. So sometimes it's just that easy, just to be the person that shows up and has a head on their shoulders, that someone's like, oh, well, this person's here every day. Like, they're with me now,
Reputation, man.
Becoming a regular face is like exactly what you're saying.
Yeah.
Me working the coat check, being there 3 nights a week for the run of multiple shows, was just a regular face. And so it was real easy to, now I've seen this person who I didn't know. I've seen them, I've said hello a bunch of times, and then they find out that I'm the guy who does coat check, and I can just ask them questions now. That's like a great, anyway.
I love that. I think, and that's something that be creative in how you get your face seen. And sometimes that's the end. You got to, but it doesn't have to be I know somebody who knows somebody. It can just be Check the coats, dang it. Check the coats. I love that. Well, is there anything else you would like to share to add? Because we're a little bit over our time, and I want to be respectful of your all the things you need to get back to.
Edwards?
Maybe a shameless plug for your website and those podcasts. And
Yeah, there you go.
I do have a podcast series. You can go to alancedwards.com and
it's linked on our Talkback website, so everybody's got
go.
that.
It's using the theater and design as a jumping off point for discussing race. And it will help it for anyone who doesn't is not so saturated in it. There is a lot of change happening in the entertainment world, and particularly in the theater, and even more so, it's really hot here in the New York City metro area. And so there are some episodes that will put it in a cohesive line of what happened last year and where might we be going. A lot happened. It's funny, starting with George Floyd last May. It set off a series of events. In everywhere, but in the theater, and so that's where this is treading along. It's good. It's also informative on our history.
Yes, and it has some of our. I know you welcomed some of our own, Christine and Trish, to come and talk about things too. Ryan, any last words for our students?
I think it's just when the time comes, just say, get out there and remember that, we're going to grow this industry again. It seemed, this is a hard time to be leaving school and be thinking about college and thinking about the work industry after that. But, we're all part of conversations where we can see things are going to start picking up again. And, it's just important to be diligent and, if you really are invested in this world, just keep moving forward with it, and it'll probably be all right. So just keep doing theater, because we're going to have theater tours are going to keep coming through, and people are going to keep working and creating art. So you can be a part of that too.
Awesome. Well, thank you both so much for your time. It's been super informative to me, and so I'm sure our students have learned a lot too. So thank you so much, and I appreciate you giving back to our community. It's been wonderful. Thank you so much.